This is the lecture for the selections from Robert Nozick's book, Anarchy, State, and Utopia. So the only point to talk about here is that partway through the reading, he brings up these different like categories that you could put theories of justice into, and he gives labels to them. So he talks about like patterned principle of justice and uh, end state principles and uh, stuff like, well, yeah, so there's pattern distributions and end state distributions and other sorts of things and non-pattern distributions and, a bunch of different terms. And sometimes people start to say, oh, well, the way he defines patterned, I feel like I can put the non-patterned into the patterned if I define things like this and blah, blah, blah. Like, the thing to keep in mind is pay attention to this footnote on page 157, where he says, one might try to squeeze a patterned conception of distributive justice into the framework of the entitlement conception by formulating a gimmicky obligatory principle of transfer that could lead to that would lead to a pattern. Alternatively, one might think to make the entitlement conception instantiate a pattern by using matrix entries, blah, blah, blah. So, like, he realizes that this is a possibility. Like, if you want, you can, using the terms that he comes up with, you can fit the stuff that he says is in one category into another category or whatever if you want to. But, like, just don't do that. So it's not like he's just coming up with terms and categories and stuff for fun or because he wants to confuse us or make things complicated or whatever. No, he's doing this to explain various ideas. And so the labels that he uses and the different categories that he's coming up with, they're only useful. The only reason he's doing this is because they relate to ideas that he's trying to explain. It's the ideas that are important. And then he's coming up with these categories to help us understand the ideas. So that's not to say like you can never like raise objections or questions or whatever about how the categories work or whatever, but like make sure you're doing it in the right direction. The categories only exist to explain the ideas. So first try to understand the ideas and then figure out how the categories relate to the ideas. There's no point in sort of getting caught up with the categories and fiddling with the categories and trying to understand how they work uh, sort of apart from the ideas. And if you start to do this sort of weird sort of stuff he talks about here, that's what you're probably doing. You're probably just trying to fiddle with the categories for their own sake rather than trying to understand what is he doing with them in order to illustrate a certain idea, and you're losing sight of the idea. So that's, of course, none of this, like the specifics, you don't know yet until you read the paper and what are these categories and stuff. But that's just to say, and this is true not just for Nozick, but for everything we read in this class and for any class. Like the only the only time people are starting to make up new words or new categories or new terms or something is because they have some idea underlying it. Uh, and so what's always important is the idea, not the various terms or categories they're coming up with. And so the only time we want to spend time understanding or thinking about or imagining ways of twisting these categories or these ideas or these terms or whatever is when this has some sort of relation to whatever underlying idea uh, we're trying to think about.